This is the section where I briefly dive into Italian painters. We've got Rembrandt, which famously used this sort of triangle section of light in his paintings. I think a lot of sort of Renaissance painters understood light really, really well. I'm not going to pretend like I know Renaissance painters inside and out, but Rembrandt is famous for using this beautiful sort of triangle of light that hits the cheek on the fill side of the face. So let's say this is my nice high key here. He would create a really beautiful little triangle that sort of had soft edges, and it's a really, really satisfying look. I think why this style of lighting is really desired is it's just very flattering. It defines the facial features really well. When you're trying to create Rembrandt lighting, just again be aware of where your spill is coming from. If it's spilling all the way around the side, you might lose that triangle. And it does primarily need to be powering from one main source. If you have a really powerful fill or bounce, you might lose that sort of beautiful wee triangle there. So those are some things to consider when creating Rembrandt lighting. Chiaroscuro lighting is a type of lighting that really deals with light and dark in the scene. It deals with a lot of contrast, and it really deals with shape and the way that light moves around the scene. You'll see this really famously on sort of shafts of light that will interact in an environment. It fits really well in a film noirish sort of setting. It's sort of almost the old school version before film noir was a thing. We had these sort of dimensions of light and dark. Main thing when we're looking to create this type of effective lighting is, again, to really control your spill. When I say control your spill, I basically mean make sure that your light doesn't spill into an entire scene. It doesn't spread everywhere in an entire scene. Again, ways to use this: use cutters, use negative fill, use honeycombs, and maybe barn doors to help cut light so it doesn't spill into everywhere in the scene, and that will be the best way to really craft exactly where your light lands. You can also use a lot of hard light in this. I think generally speaking, hard light works really well when it's interacting with its environment rather than its subject. You can use hard light in spaces to create really striking dimensions. And this is a really nice technique to create captivating lighting in your scene. I mentioned bounce as a tool before. I just want to briefly mention it as a technique. You can use bounce really creatively, bounce lighting. One of my favorite uses of bounce lighting is actually bouncing on a table to light your subjects. This can be quite a fun sort of technique. I've seen this in an advert recently where they used actually a wooden table, and there wasn't even space to light all that well. It was quite a cramped sort of space in terms of how they're setting up. One way of saving on space is actually moving your fixture back, putting on a Fresnel, and then heading into somewhere which you can bounce light from. If you want to bounce light, generally speaking, you're going to do better off if you can bounce it on a light subject, a white or close to white. Sometimes though, using a table, they had a wooden table which created a nice warm glow. This can also work really well. On a recent shoot, I worked with my gaffer to bounce light throughout the scene. We did some really creative uses of this. We had light bridge panels, these sort of almost mirror-like panels which you can bounce from. They're a really, really great tool which sort of maintain the softness of the light itself, and it's quite directional. It doesn't spill very far. There's a few things we did with this. We created shafts of light and dimension. I used one of the bouncers to actually smack light straight into the camera lens at the end of one of these dollies. It was going along on a dolly slider. At the end of the slider, it reached this really strong shaft of light to sort of flare the lens. So you can be quite creative with the way that you bounce light around the scene. But yeah, it's a great way of actually moving your big heavy fixtures out of the way, creating a little bit more space, and you can bounce it around. But you can still bounce hard light. You can bounce hard light with mirrors, and you can bounce soft light with using large white sources. Bounce is a fantastic way to light your scene.